Hello. Hi. So my name's Ben. I've not scaled that full screen, but forgive the bar at the top. So I'm a digital artist, and I'm the technical director at an art studio called Invisible Flock. We are a group of artists based here in Leeds. We have a studio here. We make all our work here in the city, but we show it all over the country and all over the world. So I'm just going to talk to you. I've got too many words for 10 minutes. I'm going to come at you quite hard, so I apologize, but I think it makes sense. So what I wanted to talk about today a little bit was about the relationship between digital and culture, which is something that we find ourselves talking about a lot. Look at that. Talking about a lot, often in a cultural context rather than a context like this. But when we talk at art events or cultural conferences, we find ourselves still having the conversation a lot of the time about the relationship between the notion of digital and the notion of culture. And I'm talking about culture with like a capital C, like Radio 4 culture, like culture. And we still end up going through stuff like, is digital and culture equal? Is one bigger than, lesser than, or are they not at all related? And you'd still be surprised by the fact that we're still having people coming up with the bottom operators, or even some of those middle ones there, and we're still having these conversations today. And so we find ourselves within our practice trying to dig down a little bit more and trying to find some deeper connections between concepts of digital and of making culture. We make digital art, which means it's art that is in some function driven or performs digitality in some way. It isn't generally about digital, but there's digital in there. But that often means that our practice doesn't necessarily look like people often expect a traditional art practice to look. This is me on the beach in Jakarta trying to hack into a public internet system so we could get a live camera feed going. And then the same work, still in the same place in Jakarta, which is part of the many components that it takes to make a piece of digital work like this, which here is the work itself. So this is the object, which is traditionally thought of as the art. It's a nautical buoy that people could interact with by text message. They could send an SMS, like a virtual message in a bottle, which would get turned into Morse code, that the buoy would blink and you could see it 10 miles up and down the coast or out at sea. And people could also send that message from the UK as well as from Indonesia. Here we've got some fishermen, some Javanese fishermen who are helping just drag it out, and then the object itself. And then meanwhile, back in the gallery in Jakarta, the same feed is then appearing on a screen, and then the messages that people are sending from both countries on these like old hack TVs. And the look of joy on my face there is mainly to do with managing to get a live feed actually up and running for any period of time. But because we work with digital, we can work across distances. So that's making work that exists simultaneously in Jakarta and in Liverpool. We can also work at scale. So this is a work for a large number of audiences. It's a 3D sound work that we make where we record the sound of football crowds, like 10, 20, 30, 40,000 strong football crowds, and we play it back in this big immersive environment in city squares. This was the opening of the Hull whatever they were last year, City of Culture. It was that, and then we also can make art which sometimes feels like it isn't art at all, that exists in more of a science-based world. This was a project that we did where we were looking at the use of dementia, not the use of dementia, the use of technology in dementia. And this was some of the participants who helped us create this connected memory album, photo album, that people could submit photos to for their family members from anywhere in the world. But how do we sort of start down this route? Well, digging back a little bit, this was the first ever project where we used digital in a very deep and meaningful way. And by that, I kind of mean thinking beyond broadcast or thinking beyond marketing, thinking beyond social media, but about the digital being deeply ingrained in the work. So this was the project. This is a zoomed out view of the project. It's a mapping project called Bring the Happy. Began here in Leeds, and we collect people's memories and stories of happiness. We take over an empty shop unit, we fill it with a giant map of the city, and we ask people to come in and to mark onto the map moments or memories of happiness, telling us where it happened and how happy it made them from 1 to 10. The memories are all then logged digitally as well. I can zoom in a little bit onto Leeds. This is Leeds. We are here, Trinity, which didn't exist when we first did this project. And it actually went live today in Almaty in Kazakhstan, of all places. So I have no idea what that says. It's in Russian. But the reason why this was the first digital project that we really used digital in a really deep way is because it was doing this that we discovered the seductive beauty of PHP and MySQL databases. Now, I still don't know why this does it like this. This is Russian script, and I can't make it look right on the database. If anybody knows, come and find me afterwards. It's doing my head in. But why this is important is because if we step back from this a second and think of it more than just a kind of clever spreadsheet, what this actually is 6,000 plus little slices of people's lives. It's individual connections and moments and interactions that we've shared with strangers in the context of the installation. And it's secrets, it's stuff they've never told anybody else before, it's things they've told us with tears in their eyes. It's these beautiful, beautiful moments that are then captured into this database, which for us and our purposes as digital artists means that they're in effect turned into the raw material, sort of the pigment for our paint, for us to then rarefy and turn into art. So the same concept applies, because it's always important to remember that this is the data, there's a digital map, but all of that is a vector. The digital here in the technology is a vector that connects the work to the physical reality of the installation as it happens in the shops. Now the same thing applies to one of our other projects, which is Duet, which is a similar memory sort of collection project, this time between India and the UK. So the idea here is that it was an app. It took place over time and over space in this case. It took place over a year, and between India and between the UK. People downloaded an app, and every day for a year they were sent a question. They were also anonymously paired with somebody in the other country, and when they answered their question, they were sent their partner's answer. Super simple, just like a really stripped back, very throttled kind of social media experience. So not only did people have this one-to-one connection with someone that evolved, hopefully for the duration of a year or for a couple of days or for a week or however long they played the experience, but then we then capture all of those messages again and can transform them, and through the use of the technology that we have, we can articulate the same work in different ways. Here it is as a piece of light art at the V&A in London, and then we also have it as a much larger light sculpture, which we just took down the other week, which was on the side of a building here in Leeds. So it's the same concepts, the same interactions, but because we're capturing them and reducing them to this raw format of digital, we can then articulate them in many, many different ways, which is a real core, I think, to the work that we try and make, which is exploring the connections between us, between the world around us, and the technology that we use. So we still, I did it today, have to often categorize what we do as digital art, as if they're two very, very separate things. But I kind of feel that we're at this stage now where it's almost impossible really to separate the two. Like, you basically, no matter what kind of work you're making, you are pretty much in some way entwined with the digital. So there's kind of this idea, or we feel, that we should start talking about dropping the word digital to in some way separate this kind of practice from other forms of art practice. The idea that you could potentially correlate digital art and art being digital, then being the one and the same, bearing in mind that we sort of live in this world. Now these numbers are probably different, like post the whole Cambridge Analytica stuff, but more or less, a lot of Facebook users, a lot of YouTube, a lot of Twitter, a lot of Instagram, we all know that, right? So this is, again, not my graphic, but this is a phenomenal amount of content. Every second, people are generating, people are creating, people are making, people are uploading. The way that we interact with content and culture is so radically shifted by digital that to in any way try and separate the act of making art, of making culture from it is pretty much impossible. So it doesn't feel controversial to suggest that the digital is everywhere. It's everywhere around us. So if you then follow the same logic, and I'm moving very quickly through it, that the digital and art are one and the same, we could then argue in a very, very exciting way that through the use of digital technology, we can create a situation where art is absolutely everywhere. I tried to make a JavaScript joke, but I couldn't quite find the pun, but anyway, it's up there if you get it. And so the idea being that digital allows us now this unique opportunities, both in platform, but also in the type of work that we make. That's exciting, not just if you're an artist like me, but also if you work in the digital sector, if you work in any sector, because we feel that it allows a real hybridity of purpose. It allows us to work across disciplines, to exist in multiple ways, to intersect with other practices, to create greater proximity and hybridity through the work that we make. So this is another project we do called Nanobumi, and in this one, what we're doing is we are collecting environmental data. So we're collecting air samples, air quality, water samples, rocks, audio data, electromagnetic data, all sorts of stuff, and we turn that into these heightened kind of aesthetic environments, which allows people then to get close and to interact with these potentially impossible to reach landscapes through these kind of art objects. So they could be science light, they could be political activism, they could be beautiful objects in of themselves, or they could just be a little bit of fun. But the idea is that we're manipulating and using the data that we capture to try and create these experiences for people, these interventions as we like to call them. So to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we're MIT or that we're revolutionizing the way that technology is used or anything like that, but I think what we're suggesting instead is that perhaps through art and art practice that is digitally driven, we're potentially answering this question, which I stole from a Sonar Digital Plus panel, which is the idea that our artists are new interpreters of innovation. So we think that digital at its best, and where art becomes interesting within it, is that it exists at a point of friction. It exists at this meeting point between the human, the encounter, and then it can explore the breaking points. It's held to different impulses to quote Arthur C. Clarke, the notion that any sufficiently advanced technology, although I'm not that bothered about the sufficiently advanced bit, becomes indistinguishable from magic. That's where we feel that digital creativity, digital art can all intersect and coexist at an interesting and exciting place. That's me, that's us, that's our website, all of that. That was a lot of words, thank you very much.